transforming a digital transformation of your laboratory is not done overnight, because we have been schooled, for 3 years about how this industry 4.0 is here, the digital revolution, everything is, IoT, cloud-based, and then we're just hit with a forehammer when we saw how it was actually looking in the industry.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. I am Joachim from Green Innovation Group, and I'm really excited about today's episode. It is with Malte, who's the co-founder of Inniti, a company that digitalizes lab, which has a lot of wonderful implications, allowing lab users to spend their time better, and also a lot of sustainability implications with potential massive energy savings from equipment. So tune in. But before the episode, I would also just like to say that we have launched a newsletter. And if you like this podcast, I'm sure you would like the newsletter as well on its practical tips and strategy on decarbonizing healthcare. If you're in a hospital, if you're in a pharma company, how can you go greener and still make sure that in the end it's safe and efficient for the patient. So check that out on greeninnovationgroup.com. And without further ado, here's the episode with Malte. Welcome to the show, Malte. I've really been looking forward to this. I've been following your business from the sideline after we met at some random startup event in the olden times when you could drink beer together outside. You are the founder and of Inniti.
Yes, co-founder.
Co-founder,
yes.
Co-founder. Yeah, always important distinction. Of course, there's a team behind. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, and good to see you again after 2 years in the shadow.
Yeah, likewise. What was your journey into Inniti? And perhaps you should just put the headline there first, that Inniti does laboratory automation, and we'll learn a lot more about that later. But what was your journey into starting that and being an entrepreneur?
To some extent you could say it was a bit random, but maybe then looking back it was not. But it started with me and my co-founder Anders. We studied together at the Aalborg University here in Copenhagen, where we studied manufacturing engineering, which is a lot about digitalization. Then Anders took a track about autonomous production, and I went more the soft-skilled way. And then doing our bachelor thesis, we were collaborating with a Danish clean tech company called Aquaporin, where we just had to do this lean analysis of their workflow in the laboratories. So that basically means you look at all the process steps they have and then try to optimize them. And we were pretty quickly done with that. But it was also quite a fun experience to get out in the real world. Because we've been schooled, for 3 years about how this industry 4.0 is here, the digital revolution, everything is, IoT, cloud-based, and then we're just hit with a forehammer when we saw how it was actually looking in the industry. And in the beginning, we thought, okay, it must be Aquaporin that they are really a state-of-the-art place, but maybe they just didn't get this digitalization right. So we visited a few other companies in the Copenhagen area. I could just see it was actually the same picture we saw also at the very big enterprises, that this digitalization in the laboratories was just not really a thing yet. And then doing this project, because we finished the lean analysis quite quickly, we figured, okay, let's try and build a little prototype where they can automate some of their quality control, I believe it was. And it was really, me and Anders do not have experience with the electronics, so we're kind of trying to build together this mock-up where you could automatically control some valves, which could actually free up quite some time from these researchers, because we could just see that there was people with PhDs and master degrees that were standing in the lab all day performing really manual and repetitive work when they have to conduct research, perform quality controls. And for us, with our production engineering backgrounds, it just seems like a huge waste of potential, because you should utilize their brain power to so much more.
And it's something we see that you started in aquaporin, since you worked all over life sciences and other places, and laboratories are just a key in the healthcare industry, which is our focus here in the podcast, both from the birth of a treatment in R&D for a pharma company or for blood samples or whatever it is at the healthcare situations. So how did you move on and try out the mock-up from there then?
Yeah, but then I think we got a bit over-ambitious on the bachelor project. We kind of really got stuck with it and spent, nights just sitting in the laboratories at Aalborg University building this prototype and just had a lot of fun with it. And then at some point you need to hand in the thesis and, then what? And there we have already talked about, we kind of need to create a company out of this because it was basically, it was the only way that we could continue working on it. And back then we feel
When was this?
This was in 2017.
Yeah.
So we started the company in mid 2017 because we just felt like we just started. There was so much more potential to it, and it's the same feeling I actually have now. It's like we're just getting started. There's so much we can do out there. And then we started the company, and then we also started a master at the DTU, but could see that maybe it's not totally sustainable to do a master degrees, have a startup, and it was just so much more fun. And all of a sudden you're the university student that you didn't want to be, that didn't really do the assignment, was not engaged in the group work. So it makes a lot of sense to say,
I've been there.
we will pause. That was the saying in the beginning, we'll pause the master education for now. And that's now it's 2.5 years since I was kicked out of DTU because I had not been there for 1 year. So completely fair. And then we just continued working on this. And then we got the really good thing about aquaporin is they have really open innovation approach. So we were still, after the master, unfortunately, after the bachelor's degree, we were still allowed to use their facilities, and they created this thing that's called the Aquaporin Garage, where they have invite different startups in. So really cool and a big help for us in the beginning, because that meant we could constantly test with our end users, which can actually be a bit difficult in these environments. So that was a really big help, and a big thank you to them. And then we got some, our first Inno boosters and some other grants that meant, we could start to hire some part-time helpers, and we still got SU. But that, would run out eventually, and so it
and
did.
If there are any international listeners, SU is study subsidies.
Yes, it's free money, and that ran out, and that meant we could pay ourselves a bit, and we also did then the first sale to Aquaporin.
So Aquaporin was your first customer?
They were our first customer, but at that point, which I think is a bit interesting, we are a bit more hardware focused. We also built equipment, which was, we learned that's not a good way to do it. There's no reason to it because there's so many great equipment manufacturers out there, and that's actually not the challenge that we see in the industry, because there's high quality equipment, and they have spent decades on developing this equipment. So we had no space there.
And at this point in time, was your core mission or the core problem you tried to solve still to make laboratories more efficient?
I could say actually from the beginning, our core mission have been to make laboratories autonomous.
Yeah.
And that's an utopia to some extent that we will never be able to achieve completely. I don't believe that there will be, at least fully in the industry, these dark laboratories. For some parts it can definitely make sense, but that's kind of been our working title from the beginning. But then pretty early on, we discovered that in order to make these autonomous laboratories, you first need to have an infrastructure in place. And because when you talk about Industry 4.0, the first aspect you come across is this interconnectivity. So meaning that everything speaks together. And that was the thing that is not, still isn't, but that we are developing for the laboratories to create interconnectivity between all the laboratory equipment from different manufacturers, and then make it easy, accessible to the people.
Wi-Fi and Bluetooth sensors and all these,
Exactly. So what we do is that we have a little device which we call the Inniti connector, which is a small IoT device that can be connected to basically any type of laboratory equipment and then automatically connect to our platform. And here the scientists can create experiments with the equipment from various vendors, automate the execution, so it's bi-directional communication. We can both control the equipment, but of course also extract the data from it, which is then...
Because you can control the equipment.
You can control the equipment,
Wow.
That's very cool. And then of course make the data and the control available in real time to the scientist. And that's kind of, that's the first step for us. That is getting the infrastructure in place. But we are still working towards making the laboratories autonomous. And that can mean many things. It can mean, of course, to automate some things, but it's also trying to make much better use of the data that they have available today, give it more context, and so on. But from my perspective, this laboratory 4.0, it's not something that will be solved by one company. For us, for sure, not by a company of our size, and also not by the big companies in the space like Thermo Fisher Scientific. It's simply too great of a challenge. So what we really believe is that it needs to happen in an interplay between the best companies in the space to create the interconnectivity between equipment, between different software solutions. So we are really keen on collaborating with the equipment manufacturers, with the other software companies in the space, and say that is also what creates the most valuable solution for our customers. And it's also the same trend that you have seen in many other both B2C and B2B software spaces. Is like all of a sudden, you have your Google Drive is in your Slack or in Teams and so on, so that they play well together and just make the user experience so much better for the customer.
I imagine also that, I think you mentioned it earlier too, that some of this laboratory equipment and machinery is really, really, really specific, and they've spent decades refining getting precision down to the third digit or whatever it might be. And it would be hard for any company to be the best in all of those.
Exactly. So we are focusing on our domain, which you say we take data from equipment to cloud, and then we do a lot of cool stuff with it there.
Where are lab users today?
Yeah.
And what do you enable lab users to do or to do more of?
Yeah. I think the challenge that many lab users today is that they have a lot of high quality equipment, but they can often be very troublesome to get the data out of this equipment, especially if you're working with multiple types of equipment. So what we help lab users a lot with is to centralize the data from many different types of laboratory equipment that they have available. And in also some cases, we can also help them automate the execution of the process. So instead of them, walking around laboratory, pressing the different analytical equipment, they actually have pre-programmed just by dragging and dropping on our platform their whole procedure. So just start, and then it runs automatically, and then they get the results afterwards.
That must be nice for the lab users, that they can focus more of their time and their brain power on the research and developing new things. But you wouldn't be sitting here today if there wasn't a sustainability angle to this as well, because that is our mission in Green Innovation Group, to decarbonize the healthcare industry. And as I said before, labs are everywhere in the healthcare industry. So this enablement to make lab users do more, how can this help pharma companies or hospitals in their green transition?
I think in many ways actually. So we have a few different perspectives to it. I think what we like to say internally, but now I also say it externally, is that we help other companies, save the world faster. And what does that mean? That means that we work with a lot of very interesting organizations that, are in some way or another kind of trying to help the world become a better place. That can be from developing membranes to producing different consumables at a more efficient manner, or making pharmaceutical products, but they're all kind of pushing in one direction. And we believe that we can help them get there faster. And we can do that, of course, by freeing up some resources from research, but also when you automate at the earlier stage in R&D, you take out a lot of the risk in scaling up your procedure. Because the typical flow is that you start something in R&D, you find something that actually works, then you need to go throughout scaling it up to pilot and to production. And we believe that if you scale this up faster, you will remove a lot of the deviation that you normally have in the laboratory, because it's carried out by human beings, and they make not necessarily mistakes, but they do things a bit different every time. It's difficult to completely standardize this. So by being able to automate, get more insights into your process at an earlier stage, we believe we can, or we know we can actually help them accelerate their innovation cycles and thereby get their life-changing products to market much faster. And that's one part of it. But what we can also see in the laboratories, and there is a lot of equipment out there, and a lot of this equipment actually do not have that high utilization. And that's something that becomes very clear when you connect it to a platform, because then we're no longer discussing, internally, I use that all the time. Yeah. But we can actually see, okay, maybe this only have a utilization of, say, 8%.
8?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But is there then a reason that we have, 4 of these machines, which is, a common thing in the big corporations? They often sometimes have decentralized labs out to the different departments. And that means they have a lot of the same machinery standing around, which means that it takes a lot of energy to have them, running. It takes a lot of energy to produce them, and they also occupy a lot of space. So by making people aware of how little they actually use their machinery, we can say, okay, maybe they can see maybe we don't need 4 of them. That means they can minimize the space use and the amount of equipment they buy. And I also think there is kind of a trend going on in these research organizations, which is to centralize some of the laboratory functionalities, and that I think that's very wise, because then you don't have the same equipment standing all around. So both from a cost perspective, from a sustainable perspective, from a space perspective, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a trend we will see even more here in the coming years. But that, of course, also increase the need for digitalization, because then we need to have an overview of who's having this equipment and who is running an experiment over here, and also ensure that the right person get the right data.
Yeah, and actually, so I've always find it fascinating how so many things in sustainability comes back to the same principles. Increase the utilization rates, whether it's on equipment or of buildings, or learn how to do more with less, and so on. I guess this also has a lot of implications for predictable maintenance and so on, that you will actually go from a gut feel of how old is this machine to how long has it been running. Yes. If we're running at a higher time, or we have high idle times, then it crashes faster, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, definitely. We have some very cool projects running around this, actually, where we're closely collaborating with some of the equipment providers, and that have 2 angles to it. Of course, it's to give the end user a digital experience, so they can actually see how much is this product being used and get the data from it. But another angle is also that right now they have a service contract where they come out every half year, and that they don't know beforehand if this piece of equipment have just been standing idle since they were there last, or has been running 24/7. And that has, of course, a great impact on does it need to be maintenance, because time is not necessarily a factor. So what we're doing in this project is that we are connecting their equipment to our cloud, so the user get data about this piece of equipment. But then we also, of course, with permission from the end user, give access to the manufacturer. And that means instead of going out there every half year, they go out there when it's needed. And there will, of course, be an exercise closely working together, us and our partner, to figure out what is the right time for going out there. But then now we give them the data. So then they know, okay, probably we need to replace this part within the next week, because then the user won't experience any downtime. And from the user, it's also, it's a much better service experience, because then it gets fixed before it's broken.
Yeah.
More uptime. And another interesting thing about this piece of equipment is that it gives different alarms, and depending on what alarms, it's different types of people that needs to get out there. So it can be different companies, and that's can be potentially frustrating for the customer, that they call the person they have purchased the equipment from. They send the person out, and it says, okay, this is not us. Okay, that's unfortunate, because then they just spent half a day driving through the country to fix this, and then they need to call another person. But now we can actually give them the insight to what was it, and then have the customer contact the right person right away, so that it benefits everybody. Yeah. And then I cannot really get more deep into what equipment is yet, but the interesting part about it is it used a huge amount of energy, like very massively. So what our partner is also really interested in is to try and make the customer aware. Do they need, if they're not utilized, then turn them off, because there's really a huge energy saving here, because it costs a lot of energy to keep them running.
Some of these machines it's a lot of energy. We have done a different episode with Nicoline on Green Labs. I know you also know her, and that was one of her key points was that just turn the equipment on when you need it and then turn it off again. That a lot of people would be like, it takes forever, whatever that is, to start up. So I'm just turning it on an hour ahead of time because then I know it's up when I need it.
Yeah, and I think that's also one of these things where it's just making people aware of this, right? Because you wouldn't have, I don't know, what I have at home that would use that much energy. But if I had, I would turn it off, right? And making people aware of this, sending the reports of, you had this one on for 4 weeks straight and you used it once. Wouldn't that be a good sense in turning this down?
There's so much potential here. One of Nicoline's other good points was that in the end it comes down to changing people's behavior, and the change management part of that, the users in the lab. And one of the potentials I see here as well is that the more you automate, the more you're allowed to make a change centrally to whether it's turning equipment on and off or nudging in the software. So you can have a much more leverage change. Then, of course, in the end, I mean, part of it will have to come to change in behavior of lab users. But rather than training every individual person and over time get that person to behave differently, there's for pharma companies or others, there's a lot of potential here to really go in centrally and make a change, and it's out in all the machinery then.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a big potential on notifying people, say, hey, turn this off. But I also think it's an undertold story how much energy is used for some of these. Some of the equipment use a similar amount to one Danish household, and some of these there are thousands of at just some of the universities.
So you'll have a whole city, essentially, the energy equivalent of a whole city, just from the labs at a university or research site.
And I don't think when I heard the number, I was quite surprised. Because I think if people were aware that it's this amount of energy that we're talking about, then I think they would also be more proactive in it. And so I think there can be a lot about information. And then if you say, okay, we generate reports of what is your energy usage to management or to all people in the laboratory, then it's also something that they can start, improving on. Hey, we want to do better, but right now there's nothing. So they don't have any idea. What is our baseline? Is it fine? Is it good? Is it awful?
More and more companies they're establishing a baseline of how much CO2 they're emitting from their activities, and also eventually throughout the supply chain, and then they track that and they do accounting on that and report on that just like they do on their financial numbers. And for a lot of things, it's still a lot of estimates. I mean, of course, they will know their electricity bill by then and you can approximate it, but this with your data, it seems like it could be much more actionable.
Yes, it's something. It's not right around the corner, but it's something that we're talking about also with some of our partners. Is to say we know how much it's running, and we also know how much energy it's using when it's running. So we can pretty quickly correlate these things and start to actually mapping the energy usage. To be transparent, right now it's not our core focus, but it's something that I'm quite sure we will build at some point because we have all the foundation in place. So it's not a big part. It's unfortunately not right now our main focus. We have some other bigger projects that we are prioritizing, but we have a good potential to kind of take a stand where we can also try to showcase this data for people, because we have it. It's just we can calculate it, and then it's just about showing it. So I think that's something that we'll be working on here in the coming years, and we also see from some companies that it's getting more and more attractive, and we can also see from some of our partners that it's something that they use to differentiate, because it's becoming way more of focus in the industry than it was just 5 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing. Thankfully, finally, the change is happening very fast. We started Green Innovation Group 7 years ago, and when we went out and talked to leadership in different companies, It was like, oh yeah, sustainability, we're doing that.
Yeah.
There's this person sitting over here, and it was one FTE doing a report once a year that basically said, we're pretty good, and then we have to improve a little bit over in this area.
Yeah.
And it was always public affairs and marketing that this person was positioned in. And thankfully that's changing, that more and more people are realizing that this has to be core of our business.
Yeah.
Where are Inniti today? How many people are you, and what are some of your customers?
We are in we think we're in a very good place.
Yeah.
So we have been around for 4.5 years, and it still feels like we are just getting started.
Nice.
There's been a lot of product development, and we have last year the product been in the market for around 2.5, 3 years, but this year is really where we have started to see that we kind of got the product market fit. We are getting customer in at a completely new speed, and it's also some of the biggest Danish enterprises and also Dutch enterprises that are starting that we have gotten on the platform just here the last couple of months. And we are 20 people based out of Copenhagen. Good mixtures of a lot of engineers, software engineers, electronic engineers, commercial people, some marketing. We are in a very good place, and I think it's been, of course, it's not always easy, and it's been some struggles, but there's just a lot of the things, especially commercial, that we have struggled with earlier, that we found out how to communicate our message to the end users. And when we get them in a room, people buy into it. It is a problem that everybody has, and then some are solving it, especially some of the bigger collaborations are solving it internally and have big IT departments. But there's a lot of potential out there, so it's really a pleasure these days.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Yeah, and it's always I've had the pleasure throughout of my career of working with a lot of different sustainability startups, and also a lot founded by engineers and technical people, and it's just a joy to see when that messaging click and who to communicate it to, and like, okay, you can actually solve my problem, and then we can talk about the features afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's just something we have gotten a lot of movement in here from Q4 2021 to now. We can just see we're developing so much every day, which we of course have been throughout the whole time. But now that we are more people, then we are just. I think at this point last year we were maybe 7 people, right? And now we are 20 people all of a sudden, and that just means we can do so much more things, and it's.
Oh, that's great. Also mean a lot of leadership challenges for you, I'm sure. But
but I think
it's a good kind of problem.
It's a good kind of problem, and we really have we just went on our yearly Inniti summit last Thursday and Friday, and it was such a pleasure, to have everybody together and spend some days together. And there's just such a nice energy, and it's clear that everybody wants to do the same thing. And it's nice to see the engineers chipping in on commercial workshops and vice versa. So I think we are in a really good place, and that's also we talk a lot about co-creation with our customers, with our partners, and I think that's also only possible because we have an organization where people are where we open. We take a lot of feedback in from our customers and partners because we don't know everything. We know something, but it also needs to be customer-driven and market-driven. So a lot of our development is right now based on inputs we get from our partners, it's input we get from our customers, and then we take that into the pipeline and make generic solutions of it because they are really the experts. And of course, we need to sort a bit in it.
It goes back to what you said. I guess that sorry, cutting you off about helping and enabling companies who are saving the world to do it faster.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. And if I'm sitting out there and I'm a leader of a lab or a director or SVP in R&D, and I think, hey, making all my equipment and my labs intelligent and making it easier for the lab users and getting data, how do they get in contact with Inniti?
They get to our homepage, inniti.dk.
How do you spell that?
Oh yeah, good point. inniti.dk. But it will soon, little teaser, change to .io. We are in a big rebranding exercise, which is quite fun as well, because we did, 2.5 years ago, and we just see that now our product have changed, what our mission have not changed, it has been sharpened, and that we would like to shine through. And I think what we often say when we get out to the big organizations, or basically any organization, is that they should be aware that, transforming a digital transformation of your laboratory is not done overnight. So we often say we start with a phase one, where we define kind of can be a certain laboratory, can be a certain process. We say, okay, now we together spend some time on digitalizing this. Then we do that, and then you see also what impact does it have on your other working routines. Because if you completely change the way not completely, but if you change the way the laboratory is functioning, it will also have some impact on your organization. So I don't believe that you should just, from one day to another say, boom, now we're fully digital. I really believe
and
in this. You can't, but I really believe in this agile approach also here. Start, rather isolate and say, okay, here we run an experiment, or here we try it out. And then we do that, and that maybe would last, say we test it out for 2 or 3 months, and they know, okay, we had a lot of learnings here, and then when you're implementing the next 5 laboratories, then we have taken that into considerations, because it does have some impact on your working routines. So do it over some iterations.
Very cool. Thank you so much for coming, Malte.
Thank you for having me.
Really nice to see how far you've made it and get a look in. And it's I guess digitalizing labs is one of those things that everybody out there know that it's coming, and they kind of need to do it, but it also seems hard. So thanks for coming, and we'll do another episode on how to do this in more practical terms and what are the barriers, and also come back to the sustainability benefits. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. It was an absolute joy to have Malte in. I've been following his business, Inniti, from the side, and it's just, I'm so excited about the massive impact that they will have in the future, and how digitalizing labs can help us to do more to improve R&D processes, make them faster, and his points about the sustainability aspects really hit my heart. If you think green labs are interesting, also check out our episode with Nicoline. We'll put a link in the description. And we have a newsletter as well on decarbonizing healthcare on our website, greeninnovationgroup.com. So check that out as well. And until next time, this has been me, Joachim from Green Innovation Group. Whatever you're doing to make healthcare greener, I'm really proud of you. Keep on rocking.